Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Family EV podcast with just me, which is going to come as a surprise to Joe because Joe was in this podcast. But we had two software issues, and then I had another one. And at this point, I just got to record it and get it out. And that's because we love you and we want to try and keep on task. So, no Joe today, but possibly a shorter podcast. A couple of things we're going to talk about today investment in the battery space. We're going to talk about used car prices. Um, and we're going to talk about, I actually have notes. I know, crazy, right? And something I didn't touch on with Joe because it came out after we finished recording Tesla and CCS in North America. So, without further ado, I'm John, regular EV dad, and I think we can all agree the haircut, which I'm getting in a couple of hours, couldn't come too soon. It needs to have happened. Before we get into all of that, though, if you've happened to follow my Instagram, not the car-related one, but my personal one of British John Comedy, that's Jon. Then if this is going to be one of those, we're going to do some share. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or whatever, wherever you get your podcasts, this is the day you might want to come and look at the YouTube channel because I'm going to do some screen sharing, which we don't do too often. We try and avoid it, but it's relevant to today because we're going to talk about various different things. And I'll just share I'll share the tab. Where are we? There we go. And so for those of you who aren't aware, I do quite a lot of stand-up comedy, and I open for some very interesting people. In fact, I'm getting on a plane later on this week to be back with Tony Hinchcliffe in Denver. So this week, somebody cut our gas line for the transit we have. This is what the van that my wife travels around in. I could do it as well for dog shows. That's my wife's thing. She married me. You knew there had to be something weird, right? So all of this took place in the wonderful location. Let me share that, which is the Oxford Suites in Portland. Jensen Beach. Let me give you a quick overview of what's been going on. So my wife, as I mentioned, and I'll be putting up a recording of this shortly, I rented a Model 3 standard range. I was going to get Model Y Performance, but I got a standard range because I thought it would be interesting to take a car with a smaller range and capability and see how it performed on a long trip. And so I shot up to Seattle. Yes, I know that's not Portland. We'll get to that. I shot up to Puyallup and Sumner, just south of Seattle, on last Sunday, rather, the MLK weekend. And the car did great, by the way. You know, it's not the car; it's the network you can charge from, and the resiliency of it, and the spacing, and da 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 da. It was a great trip. I would say it was enjoyable. It was long and it was tiring and grueling, but it worked. And I do not have that level of confidence. And when I looked at the data about availability of Electrify America on I-5 North, no good. I made the right choice. And it was interesting to do it in that car because that's the car that Joe's just bought in terms of the specs. So, you know, this is what he'll have to live with. Smaller battery, 170 kilowatt, rate of charge, not 250, yada, yada, yada. And I drove back with Copilot London on Monday morning. We got home on Monday night. My wife then went down to Portland to dog show that was taking place at the Portland Expo Center. And she was staying at this location. On the second night, she called me in the morning. She said, "There's a smell of gas. Do you think it's safe to drive the car?" I said, "Well, you know, it's an old school handbrake. Push it out if you have to." And she took a look underneath, and yes, somebody had cut the fuel lines and to siphon out the petrol. Um, it's a $600 repair and a lot of inconvenience. You had to take care of the dogs and that. I also had a puncture, but can't blame that on anybody. The reason I mention this, and this is what's on my Instagram, is that the hotel would not release details of who committed the crime without a warrant from the police. They wouldn't even give it to the police. And at this point, you're saying, John, that sounds crazy. That doesn't sound right. Hold on. The next day, the very next day, some friends of ours had their dogs stolen. Yeah. They've since been recovered. We just want to make that clear. So this has all been dealt with by now. But again, they wouldn't release these images and the details of who did it for more than 6 hours after it took place. They wouldn't give the details of the theft to the police. And you're thinking, John, that's crazy. How could you possibly know that? If you're not aware, I have a background in security, and I can find people and find things. It's just something I can do. I'm not saying the police can't do it, but I do it as well. And they called the police on me because I threatened them with a bad review. I called them and I said, look, can you help me? I want to get some information on the person that stole these dogs. And then I can start working through my network of people and we can, try and get on top of this situation as quickly as possible. They said, no, we can't do that. I mean, this is the same thing with your fuel thing. We can't help. It's not the law. It's our policy. I said, you do realize you've got 60 odd rooms let out to people from this dog show. They're going to leave bad reviews. At which point he said, and I was being nice because when you do this for a living, when you do, I do something called social engineering. I don't mean in a good way or a bad way. It's just this is how hacking works. It's easier to compromise people than it is to compromise computer systems. You don't want to piss them off, so you're charming and you're nice. If you have a British accent, you use it. This guy, their assistant manager, called the police because I threatened them with a bad review. I'm not joking. I know this because the police called me from Portland and said, we're calling to put some cold water on a situation. I said, what situation? He said, apparently you threatened them. I said, I threatened them with a bad review. And the police officer said, and I quote, yeah, that's what they said. And at that point, more than 6 hours, it was actually technically 7 hours and 42 minutes at that point, the police officer confirmed that they still hadn't given the video images to the police of either my van or the stolen dog, the vans and the stolen dogs, because they were demanding the police come with a warrant. There is no law that requires. They chose to protect the criminals and make sure the criminals weren't offended. So, if you want to get robbed, I would go stay at this hotel. It's a great location. I'm sure it's referred to locally as the catalytic converter farm. Seriously. Should we get on with the real stuff? That sounds like a great idea. So, one of the other things Joe and I talked about, and not because I have an answer to this, but just because I just find it interesting. Two pieces of North America battery news this week. GM and LG have decided are not going to move forward with a fourth site, which is interesting. They have they already. I have notes that changes. So they have two sites. They have 3 sites already in one in Lansing, Michigan, one in Tennessee, and they already produce in Ohio. That's what's currently the ones going into the Hummer and the Cadillac Lyric come out of Ohio. And they've decided they're not moving forward on a 4th site, which they were considering in, I'm going to say Indiana. I think I'm in Indiana. They are still they are still going to create a 4th plant, but they're not going to do it with LG. But at the same time, Ford has run into issues. Ford wanted to build a partner with CATL on the creation of a battery plant in Virginia. But Virginia will not work with CATL because of their Chinese affiliations. So they will not give tax credits and stuff like that, which is hugely important to creating jobs and massive plant and infrastructure these days. I mention this because I find this interesting. Don't have an answer to it. I don't. Obviously, LG and GM have an interesting relationship. They did the batteries for the Bolt, and we all know what happened. The number of jokes we've made about that, but then they've invested in more plants since, and so who knows what's going on in that situation. But what's so important about this is that GM doesn't have a contract for cobalt and lithium. Their partnership does. Their battery producing partner owns the contract. The only people that don't work like that is Tesla. Tesla has the direct contracts for sourcing materials, which it then supplies to Panasonic, who then turns them into batteries for them in Nevada and elsewhere. Or they just buy whole batteries from CATL for the smaller range ones, for the iron batteries. Take out the issue of the geopolitics of this. This is interesting. Geopolitics, everything, but they need to make these investments. We need to, as a country, and both Europe and North America, become self-sufficient. But you got to be able to get hold of the source materials, and who you do business with, and who's. This is why I think the Inflation Reduction Act is going to have to be refined for the second part of for the rebates on where stuff comes from, because we're going to have to include WTO partners and things like that moving forward, and deciding on what the quality of those contracts is in terms of the kind of how it is extracted from the grounds, environmental damage, labor laws, and those kind of things. I just found it interesting. If you're still here, what Joe and I didn't talk about, which has happened since then, is there has been a leak, and I believe the credit of this goes to Brandon Flash. Tesla has created a Magic Dock CCS adapter, which will be built into superchargers, and it will allow, and this is how they're going to do CCS charging. And apparently some sites already have it as showing as being, is it available? But the V3s in Hawthorne, according to Hayden Sawyer, are showing as being CCS compatible. So if this is how they're doing this, then this is interesting. This is interesting. If this was, if this is an adapter, which you'll be able to unlock it and get the whole thing, and if not, you'll just get the Tesla adapter. Great. I hope that Tesla will make these just available, so you could carry one in your car if you wished. So you don't have to wait for them to roll them out, unless, of course, they do a really fast rollout like they did when they adopted CCS in Europe. The perfect road trip for me this past weekend, given the fact, excluding for that, I only paid $180 or whatever it was to rent the Tesla to put 2,000 miles in it. The idea of being able to take the e-tron on the road but have access to the supercharger network, that would have been awesome. Used EA most of the time, but because it's cheaper, but then that really creates a market. When you can look at the different rates between EA and even, EVgo and regional suppliers, choice is a good thing. Drives investment, drives behavior. So interesting stuff. Which brings me to the last thing we're going to talk about, used car pricing. So we talked on the last podcast, obviously, about the reductions in price that Tesla had put in place over the past couple of weeks, which was noteworthy in and of itself. But then that causes a natural question. What happens to used car prices? And right now, Tesla Model 3s and Model Ys, secondhand, according to car gurus, over the last 30 days, have dropped 17.9% in value and price. And in fact, we went through on the podcast, we were looking at cars and bids and Tesla and car gurus at recent sales. And yeah, there are some great sub 50,000 mile Model 3, sub $30,000 cars out there right now. When you compare that with the Chevy Bolt, new and with tax credits and all those kind of things, it's compelling. It really is interesting. In fact, it's 48 hours since I recorded this with Joe. Let me just go to Car Gurus very quickly, and let's look at what I can get for my money right now. I'm going to do this in Tesla Model 3. I'm going to do this within. Let me share my screen. So let's go with lowest prices first. And let's make the radius 1 Chardsworth, so 200 miles. These are all sponsored ones at the top. But then, all right, so, 90,000, 100,000, not really a great thing. $30,000, that's standard range plus. Joe paid more than that. Well, I mean, that's about right. Nice wrap you've put on that, I will say, my friend. These are all standard range plus. Let's go with all-wheel drive. So 35. Okay, you're in the wrong place. You don't know how to use things. Long range, all-wheel drive, 50,000 miles is at $35,000 right now. That seems to be the sweet spot. But let's look at EVCPO. And if you don't know EVCPO is, let me just share that, EVCPO. This has access to all of Tesla's inventory. So if I look at Model 3s that are used in the US right now, and this is usually accurate for about 20 minutes, and I'll go to the cheapest prices. Right now, you can have let's open it in a new tab so you won't be able to see it. But for $31,000, where's the price? It's just down the road from me in Gilroy. You can have a 2019 Model 3 standard range in white with 30,000 miles on the clock. That is not a price.
Nice. I just haven't been feeling myself lately. I've been trying to find a better way to save my money, but I keep dragging my feet. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm out. What is the price?
I got an ad. That's amusing. So that's rear-wheel drive. We can actually we can actually specify standard range, so long range rear-wheel drive and long range all-wheel drive. Let's do a quick update there. So these, I wouldn't personally go, but yeah, $37,000 with 30,000 miles on the clock, and the latest FSD package on it as well. So that doesn't mean you actually get the software that's enabled, but you've got you have the capability. It's a late model. That is good. If we look at the Model Ys, now here there's it's interesting that there's quite so many of them available. But we have a starting price of $45,400. So when you consider that a new one will, let me get the latest prices because these things are a little bit dynamic. Order now. So I can have one for 50. I was going to make sure you hit the purchase price. So right now, a brand new Model Y will start at $53,000, but you'll get $7,500 off that in tax credits if you qualify for all the various elements. That is still pretty good value. You know, you're saving a bit of money and getting it a little bit sooner. Tesla has demonstrated that they didn't have a demand problem. I mean, they even if we look at in the USA right now. Hold on, let me do this the other way around. So, all Model Y new 246. There's 246 available right now, starting at $55,000. So $55,000 versus 40, so $10,000. So you're saving yourself $2,500. $2,500. That's about the right price if you think about it. 27,000. They call it $100. But they have availability. But they are going. I went past the Tesla store in Santana Row the other day, and it was heaving, absolutely heaving. So these are interesting times, but I think it's also show that that things are coming back to normal. What's going to be interesting is what Ford do. So Ford increased its prices because obviously with the dealers doing all the markups and market adjustments, Ford felt they were leaving money on the table. They've increased their prices. The question is now, will they decrease their prices? And how are they going to make sure those prices are passed on? That is a question Joe and I will talk about next time. Sorry if this seems like a rushed episode, just technical issues that got in our way. But we'll be back next week, and I hope you'll consider staying subscribed. You have yourselves a great day.